In 1 minute, our webinar will start, so please check that you have the sound. Before we start, I would also make some notes. In the end of the webinar, you will see the form. You need to fill it in, and after that you will get the certificate. And the second thing is that closely to the end of the webinar, you will have an opportunity to type your questions to our presenter, and she will try to answer these questions. So we're ready to start. Our speaker today is Laura Hudson. She works for Macmillan Education. She's a business trainer. She has a huge experience in teaching business English. And today she is going to share her experience based on Macmillan Business English course in Company 3.0. Laura, the floor is yours. Good luck.
Okay, hi. So, hello everyone. Can you all see me and hear me okay? Perfect. Okay, so yeah, hi. As Ina just said, I work for Macmillan in Germany, and before I joined Macmillan 12 years ago, I worked as a business English teacher for 7 years. So I have a lot of information I can give you. We have 45 minutes, so I'll try to make sure I keep to time. I forgot to set my timer, but never mind. So you can't see me, Svetlana. That might be your computer, not mine. Oh, okay, there you go. Hello. So we're going to be talking about In Company today. In Company is our business English course book for business professionals. It's also used at universities. So what I'm going to do is give you some information about the types of learners that use the courses in my experience working in Germany, Austria and Switzerland. And obviously some information about how the course is set up, the kind of activities you can expect, the highlights of the course, and some examples of companies and why they use it. So hopefully in 45 minutes I'll give you a good overview of the course. So before we talk about In Company itself, I want to look at the types of learners we have. My slides are not working. Here we go. Here we go. Okay, now they are. So let's look at a definition of a business English learner first of all, the different characteristics they have, their reasons for learning, the types of aims they have. There's quite a difference in my experience between general English learners and business English learners. So I'm going to look at two different types. The first type is the corporate customers. So these are people who are normally 30 years old and older. In my experience, anything up to 65 is completely normal in a class. In company classes, so teachers tend to go into the companies themselves and have the classes there. So what defines these types of learners? So for general English, the types of learners we have, and I'm sure these will you'll recognize this type. For general English, when they book courses, there is often no time limit for them on their course. They just take up an English course. Sometimes they normally book around 60 hours normally to start with, and they don't put a limit for themselves on how long that course is going to run for. Often with general English, socializing is a key factor. I know from my own experience living in Germany and in Denmark and learning the language, that meeting new people in a new country was a very big part of it for me. So socializing is a big thing for general English learners. They choose to go to class a lot of the time as well. There's always a huge surge in the number of general English courses at language schools in January, for example, after they make New Year's resolutions and things like that. They pay for these courses themselves normally as well. They don't have anything to prove to anybody outside the class. They're normally doing it solely for themselves. They don't have to go back into their bosses and say, okay, I've done a course in English. They're doing it for themselves normally. And they often don't have specific aims with the course. It's not that they come in and say, I need language for this particular scenario. They normally come in just because they want to learn a bit more and speak a bit more. Sometimes it's because they find they're going on holiday and using English, or they have friends that don't speak their language and they communicate in English, or relationships happen and all this sort of thing. So there are very different reasons why people take general English courses. But when we think about our corporate customers coming to classes, it's quite a different scenario altogether. Business English courses, normally companies book them. They're company funded. So they tend to book, certainly in Germany, they tend to book 30 hours first of all, see how it goes, and then book extra 30-hour blocks after that. So for the teacher, that's very interesting as well. They know that there's a time limit on the course, so they have to prepare the courses in a very different way, and this actually demands a different type of support in the teacher's books, and I'll show you that later, of how we support freelance or busy business English teachers, because they have to be able to be very, very flexible in the way they teach. Often these intensive courses are booked for a week or something like that. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it's actually over a period of time. But very often when I was teaching business English, I would have a class for one whole week from 9 till 5. Very intense, very draining, very exhausting for the students. And particularly intensives were very often one-to-one classes. They tended to be these ones tended to be the company executives who found that they suddenly had a big gap in their knowledge. I remember teaching one man who was the CEO of a huge engineering company here in Germany, and he was a complete beginner, and he had 30 hours of classes to start with. He eventually booked 3 months of classes, intensive classes with me, to get up to a level where he could attend meetings and be in boardroom discussions. So they're often in class with a specific reason for learning. Often it's through necessity, like this customer I've just told you about. There's often a lot more pressure on these students to perform in their own jobs. Certainly we see a boom in business English classes when there is a recession or any kind of economic crisis in Germany, because people feel the need to have some kind of certification to show that they are worth keeping in their jobs when they know that jobs are going to be cut. So students are often very stressed in business English classes as well. So the materials have to be fun enough to keep those stress levels at a minimum if possible. Their goals are normally, nearly always, very specific, and they are often extremely ambitious for their level as well. Unlike with the general English, where they have as long as they need to reach a certain goal, with business English they don't, because they're funded by the companies themselves. So you often have, like the customer I mentioned, who is an A1, A2 level, needing to learn language that is a B2, C1 level. So business English course books have to be able to adapt to these scenarios. How you can't say to a CEO of a company, no, you need 6 years to do this, when his meeting is in 3 months' time. You have to have a way of being able to teach. So the next group I'm going to tell you about, these are the graduate students. So these are the students at university studying business English. They are also they face a different kind of problem that we're also able to help them with. Now, this is a quote from the chairman, the former chairman, I believe now, of KPMG, which is an enormous insurance company. And he said that graduates are leaving education with inspiring theoretical knowledge but lack practical job-related skills. There's a soft skills gap developing. Now, this is extremely interesting, and I have to say that I've noticed it myself with my very own cousin, who unfortunately, aged 21 2 years ago, she was fired on day one of her first ever job because she was on Facebook and things during her lunch break. I have to add, she was on her mobile phone, but sat at her desk because she didn't have the skills to meet new people. She was lacking the social skills to say to people, hang on a minute, is there anything else you need me to be doing? So while she was waiting for them to come to her, she was on her phone, and of course they fired her for this. So that's just an example. It's an extreme example, I know, but there is this is something that's being said by a lot of people. The students coming into work at the moment are extremely clever, but the practical application of the language they're learning is not. It's not they're not studying it. It's just that it's taking a back seat. So there's so much focus on exams and the testing of the language that the practical side, there often isn't enough time. I know certainly in Germany the face-to-face time in the classrooms is around 30 to 40%, and 60 to 70% is expected as self-study. So we have to be able to develop, to adapt to those scenarios as well with our materials. So that's an awful lot to ask a business course to do. So let's have a look and see how we manage it. So in Company 3.0, this is the third edition of this course. It's been hugely successful, certainly in Germany, where business English makes up the majority of my daily work, actually. And as a freelance business English teacher, I had more hours than I knew what to do with. So there's plenty of this going for teachers. But the reason we keep only 3 components for In Company is to keep it very, very simple for both the teachers and the students. So there is a student book pack. So this is the printed students book. There's only 1 component for the students, and there's a reason for this. Primarily, this course is aimed at business English professionals, and they very rarely even remember their student book, let alone a workbook. So we don't have a separate workbook. What we have instead is at the end of each unit, there are 18 to 20 units in every level of In Company. At the end of each unit, there is there are 2 pages which are language links. Now, this is the grammar and vocab practice that accompanies the unit that you would normally find in a separate workbook, but it's integrated within the course material for this particular course. That means they have no excuse to forget their workbook if they've got their students' book. They have everything together. In the front of the students' book, there's also an access code, a web access code that gives them access to an online workbook and a student resource center. The online workbook it replaces, again, a physical workbook. So if the language link pages in the book are not enough, they have all of that extra practice online. So these are interactive exercises, practicing grammar, vocabulary, reading and listening skills. It's automatically marked. It does not give them feedback of whether they're right or wrong. That is still the teacher's job. If we were to do that, we would need a worldwide organization that had teachers correcting online workbooks, which we don't have, unfortunately. So it does give them just an instant result, and they can, of course, try it as many times as they like. The Student Resource Centre has the class audio files and all of the videos. Now, In Company 3.0 has a lot of video content, which is just fantastic. really adored by our business English customers here in Germany. They found this to be an extremely useful and important addition to this new course, this 3.0 level. So the class audio and video can be used online, and it can also be downloaded, so they can use it offline on any device they like, whether that's a laptop or a mobile phone or a tablet. The teacher's book pack is the teacher's notes, as you would expect. It has a lot of extra information in there. It has fast track mapping document, which I will talk about a little bit later, which is a way of adapting the material for different hours. The teacher's code at the front has access to the resource center, which has the same content as the student resource center, but it also has all of the extra resources like the video worksheet, so you can actually do video lessons in class as well. Tanya, can you check your microphone? I think that might be where you've got an echo. Where was I? Yes, they also have tests and all sorts of things like that, and answer keys. All of them have answer keys. The class audio is available as separate CDs if you don't like to download as well, but most people actually download the materials from their web code. So that's the course components. Very, very simple. It's very easy. If you work for a language school and you are selling courses to companies, this is a really easy product to sell. Our customers absolutely love it here because it's so simple that it has one pack, one price, and it's easy for them to add into the course offer that they make to the companies. So, things that are particularly popular here that you might like to take a look at yourselves. Within the student book content, the fact that it is all in one is an enormous plus for everybody. It's just very, very simple. The student book access code lasts for 2 years. The teacher's code lasts for 4 years. So you have plenty of access to all of that material. The video content, as I've mentioned, is hugely popular. I'll show you a little bit more about that later. And also for this edition we added business scenarios and people skills. So this really is making InCompany even more communicative than it was before. It's always had a reputation in the business English world as being the most communicative of all the course books out there, because it's a very heads-up classroom. It's quite fun to use. The students have a laugh while they're learning as well, which is very important for busy professionals taking time out of their daily work. So these business scenarios and people skills, these are the parts that really allow them to bring that language into the real world. So I've got a few examples to show of the different content. I've taken, for the sake of consistency, I've taken all of the examples from the intermediate level. This is the B1 plus level. So the content, as I said, is extremely communicative. The authors of InCompany are Mark Powell and Simon Clark. And I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Mark Powell before, but he's quite the entertainer if you're ever lucky enough to see him present. He's actually a trained actor who switched into teaching business English. So he brings in a very different edge into business English. He makes it a lot more communicative than other materials that I used to use when I was a teacher. Unfortunately, InCompany wasn't available when I was teaching. Otherwise, I would have used it as well. This example is from the very beginning of the intermediate course. It's in Unit 1 actually, and it's all about, that particular unit is all about training people to go to conferences, and it's all about networking and socializing. Which is actually one of the most important things when you're going to conferences. Next month in Germany we have the Frankfurt Book Fair, for example, and although I have big business meetings while I'm there, the main reason for everybody to go to Frankfurt is to catch up on the latest gossip, find out what's going on in the industry, meet new people, create new contacts, catch up with old friends. It's a very, very social thing as well as a big business event. So this is all about, this whole unit is all based on sort of the social chit-chat that you get at conferences, and how to gossip, which is an underrated skill. Finding out all the news and gossip in business English, in the business world, is hugely important. Otherwise you don't know how to build on your reputation or your company. So the next page from this actually has a picture of a conference room, and it's a listening text which you have to pick out all the details of people. So who is that over there? What are they doing now? Oh, really? They've been headhunted. Wow. By what company? What are they doing? What's the gossip? So it's extremely fun, and from my own business experience, it's realistic as well. This is the same topic, but right from the very end of the intermediate level. So that's the other thing about In Company. You can actually cherry pick content to create intensive courses. So if you just have students who need to be able to go to conferences and communicate better, you can actually extract that content from within the course. So you can choose to only do 6 out of the 20 units instead, for example. So it's a very flexible offer for business English students. So this particular exercise, you can see the red line around the edge says business communication. Within every single unit, you have these particular areas where it's about business communication. This is the most important part of teaching business English students. They all come to classes because they need to communicate better. So having a focus on the speaking skills is the absolute highlight for them when they come to class. The written stuff and all of the extra grammar and vocab practice, that's why we have the online workbook, because it's actually just as easy for them to do the extra work on that at home and double check. The stuff that they can't do at home is the speaking, the role plays, the presentation practice, all of this sort of stuff. So this has there's a much greater focus on this within In Company than the stuff that they can actually do at home. So this particular exercise is about a conference dinner. Actually, this is very stressful for a lot of business students if they're abroad on business trips. The idea of going out for dinner with colleagues who are different nationalities, everybody speaking English, most with some kind of dialect or accent, this can be very stressful. So this kind of realistic activity is extremely important to them, and they find it extremely beneficial as well. So as I mentioned, for the 3rd edition, we added in business scenarios. Now, it depends on the level. The business scenarios for the lower levels, so elementary and pre-intermediate, they are workplace scenarios. The intermediate, upper intermediate are management scenarios. So they change focus slightly depending on the level. So these scenarios go along with the videos. So you can either do this in class, or you can have the video as the homework or the self-study option, or you can have it completely blended. You can use it as flexibly as you need to. So this scenario is about having tricky conversations. This is not a fun thing. I'm a manager myself, and I have a lot of tricky conversations. So I can recommend this particular unit. So this is the type of thing they do. The students can either watch the videos afterwards, or they can watch it first to give them some inspiration. Certainly if you're teaching groups of engineers, for example, they tend to be a little bit more, somebody's raised their hand. Is there a question? I'll let Ina answer you. So yeah, you can either have it done at the video as the introduction to that, and also for business English students at universities, this is very useful as well, because what they lack is the business experience itself. obviously they've not had an office job so far, so watching the video can give them a feel of what they're being expected to do and what sort of language they're being expected to produce. So it works in both ways. I would personally recommend watching the first video first, because the first one is before they do any of the other exercises, because the first video introduces it in the not so perfect way. Then they can just have a discussion around that and can practice it themselves. And then the second version of that video is the kind of ideal way that they could have done that. So those are the first two videos that go with these scenarios. The third video is actually authentic listening. So these are interviews with people from either the specific industry that relates to that unit, or they're talking about a particular aspect of their roles that's relevant to the unit. So, for example, in the pre-intermediate level, there is an interview with the CEO of Hyundai Motors, talking about the types of skills that he would expect somebody to have within his company. So they're very interesting, and they're proving to be quite a hit actually with customers. The other thing that we've added are people skills, and this is particularly important for business learners and also for the business students at university. These people skills are the ones that train them in the sort of the things that they don't necessarily realize they need practice in. So, for example, it is extremely full of functional business practice arena. You're right. Everything about this course is functional. It's really a pick up and go type of course. So this example of people skills, this is about impact. This is about training presentation skills, for example, whether that's actually giving a presentation or within a meeting and making your opinion have a stronger impact. It's how to use the language and how to use yourself to create more impact. There are other units that look at collaborative skills, for example, so working with others. Again, if you imagine a university student, they're not necessarily so used to working in a team as somebody who's been in a job for 20 or 30 years. So these kind of skills they're almost like a secret. They're not something that somebody would necessarily pick up as something they need practice with. Yes, Dennis, it came out 2 years ago. I still call it new because it's the 3rd edition. So it's new in comparison to the other ones I've been selling. When you look at the lower levels, when you look at the lower levels of in company, it's working on things like active listening. So if you imagine an A2, B1 student sitting in quite a complicated meeting where ideas are flying around all over the place, a lot of brainstorming, it's extremely difficult for them to keep up with what's going on a lot of the time. So training their active listening skills is hugely important so that they're able to pick out more clearly what they need to be listening to, and it allows them to interact with their colleagues in a much better way. So at the lower levels, there's far more of that. So these people skills, this addresses the issue that I mentioned, the CEO of KPMG saying that there's this skills gap. These people skills are hugely important. And I think it's quite interesting to have a double page to practice these specific skills. And the students seem to, certainly the feedback we've had so far is that the students really appreciate these units. So looking at the video, as I said, we've got two types, in company and action, which is the ones with the actors. So this is level appropriate. We have the in-company interviews, which is authentic, because it's extremely important for business people to have access to authentic listening, because that's what happens in the real world. However, when they're learning the language, it can be demoralizing if it's only authentic listening. So they need to be given a chance as well. So the in-company and action are level appropriate, done with actors, so that everybody is able to learn. These are available on the Student Resource Centre and the Teachers Resource Centre. You can download them. They both have the video scripts as well. So if you've got particularly weak students in the class or nervous students, there are a lot of people. I think this is important to remember with business students, when certainly it was something that I tried to think about when I was teaching, is that the people that come into business English classes are professionals in their particular role. They're trained, and this is their thing. This is what they've been doing for a very long time. So coming into an English class, suddenly they can find themselves a little bit vulnerable. They are often out of their depth, or they feel pressure. So giving them extra support is extremely important. And so some students are also very shy. Certainly if their manager is in the group, they don't really want to show any kind of weakness. So having the video scripts gives you more possibilities to adapt your classes to specific needs. And of course, once you've printed it out from the online resource centre, they are photocopyable, so you can black out certain words, or with Tipex, whichever you prefer, and do it as an extra listening practice as well, or use them for tests if you're at university, whatever you want to do. The Teachers Resource Centre only has the extra video worksheets as well, so if you really want to extend those video lessons, there is plenty of material available for you to do that. Please don't be overwhelmed by the amount of content we have in the Teacher Centre. You don't have to use all of it, obviously, but we have a lot there so that the course is as flexible as possible for teachers, because that's the whole point with business English. You have to have the material available for 120 hours. You also have to be able to adapt it for just 25 or 30 hours. So it's a very challenging job, but very exciting at the same time, I always thought. So that's the video. In Company Online, this is the online workbook, which is accessed through the code in the front of the student's book or the teacher's book. So this is the interactive extra material online. It has the automatic mark book, and this works on the gaming principle. There's been a lot of research done in online resources, and the idea of games is that you always try to beat your best score. So what we do is we have your first score, your current score, and your best score. So it always encourages students to go back and try and beat their best score. It has an automatic mark book, and as I said before, it doesn't give feedback on why they were wrong. That is the teacher's job. However, you do see how often they've tried something. So if they come into class and say, well, I got 100%, but it took them 50 attempts to get there, then you know that there's a problem that needs sorting out. So you do have access to some very useful feedback that you can use to help prepare your classes. The Teachers Resource Centre has all of the additional teachers materials that you all love, so all of those photocopiable worksheets and things like that, the placement tests and progress tests. We also have the case studies that were in the second edition of In Company. These weren't as popular in the course book. People found that they were a little bit too slow for class. So we've added that content to the Teachers Resource site so that you can do them if you want to. A lot of students really like case studies, so they're still there for you to use, just not in the book itself. There's also the fast track mapping document, which I think is my next slide. If it's not, it's coming up very soon. It's my next slide. Yay, lucky guess. So the fast track options. This was something that I specifically asked our editorial team to produce. It's something that we do for, certainly in Switzerland and Austria, we do for our secondary and primary courses. We have different types of mapping, as we call it. So we have to save teachers time, basically. Teachers are very, very busy people, work a lot of do a lot of work in their free time with preparation. So the idea of these mapping documents, or fast track in this case, is to save teachers time, do the work for them. We do it for school teachers by mapping our courses to their syllabus so that they just turn up to class and they know how many pages, which exercises they need to do every single day of their semester. So why not do that for business English teachers as well? When I was a freelance business English teacher, I was already teaching at 7:30 in the morning. I was never home before 10 o'clock at night, teaching all over the city. And most of my preparation had to be done in between classes very quickly, often on train platforms waiting for trains to arrive. So these are hugely useful. Don't worry, Olga, you're not too late. It's nice to see you. So these are different options. So there are 3 tracks: a taster track, the language practice track, and the language input track. And then each track has 2 versions of those. So the classic fast track for the longer courses, or the express fast track for shorter courses. Now this is just a very, very brief overview that I've given you here. I promise it makes a lot more sense when you see the teacher's book. But you'll see from this slide what those sorts of tracks cover. A lot of business people come into courses and book intensives, as I mentioned before. So often they're looking for skills courses, or they're looking for communication courses, often with a very specific target. So these fast track possibilities are really important for teachers to have, and it saves an enormous amount of time. You just have to pick up the book, and it tells you exactly what you need to teach for this number of hours and for this type of course. So I hope you like that, because that was one of my ideas for the new edition. If you don't like it, don't tell me. But I'm hoping it saves you time. So just some examples, just 2 examples actually, of why it's working. As I said, I've worked in Germany for Macmillan for the last 12 years, and this is by far our biggest seller. We sell it into companies and to universities here. We give so many workshops to schools and to teachers, giving them lots and lots of different ideas of how to use the materials. Using it for skills courses, or how to teach beginners, all of this sort of thing. And one of the biggest reasons that people use it is because it's practical. Business English people, it's a bit like if you think about going into teacher training. When you do a teacher training session, you're looking for ideas that you can put into practice immediately. I'm hoping that some of the ideas today you'll pick up on and use in class tomorrow maybe. But this is exactly the same as business English students. They are taking out an hour, 90 minutes from their daily job, sitting in an English class and trying to learn something that they know in an hour or 2 hours, or maybe in a week, they're going to need. Everything about business English is practical and has to be functional. So an example of a company that wherein company works is Bosch. Now Bosch in Germany, amongst other things, but primarily they're based in Stuttgart actually, where I live. They provide car parts for the car industry. There are a lot of these engineering companies around Germany. I used to teach in several companies up in Essen near Düsseldorf, who produced car handles, car locks, the metal sheets for car roofs, you name it. There's thousands of these types of companies. And what's been happening a lot, and I'm sure it's happening in Ukraine as well, a lot of these companies have outsourced local jobs to places like China and Korea. It seems to have slowed down a little bit over the last few years, but certainly back in 2007, I remember Mercedes here in Stuttgart outsourced something like 3,000 jobs to Hungary and South Africa. So this is something that has had a huge effect on the business English environment. What our customers were finding was that, of course, there was a lot more communication practice that was needed. Certainly if they were dealing every day with colleagues, new colleagues in Asia in particular, or South Africa as it was in the case of Mercedes. So there actually was a boom in English courses for exactly this type of thing. what else happened was that there were far more exchange programs run by companies as well. So a lot of this happens a lot with the Japanese companies as well. People get sent across to Germany for a year to live and work in Germany with their colleagues to learn the local culture. This cultural awareness training is a huge part of in-company actually. Learning to communicate across cultures and not cause offense and to help understanding, help with the listening skills. This is a massive part of this course. So the other thing is that a lot of Germans were being sent across to Asia in particular to train people locally on German culture and the culture of their company. So again, they had a new demand for their courses as well, things like presentation skills, cultural awareness training, all of this started to happen. And that's a really big opportunity for language schools. This is also the sort of thing that where it helps with the pre-work students. So the university students, obviously they need to be able to show as soon as they get into a job that they're capable of just jumping in and getting on with it. There's a massive amount of competition for students. There are not as many jobs available as there used to be, so the competition is quite cutthroat in a lot of cases. So they have to be able to really prove that they can do this. Another thing that's happened is that many of the big companies, Volkswagen is an example of this, they have changed their official company language to English because they have so many departments and branches across the world. The common language is English rather than German or French or whatever it is. So this is something that has been a very big trend in business English over the last 10 years in particular, where a company's official language is in English, and that causes quite a lot of trouble for the local colleagues. Here, for example, they find that a lot of the time they have trouble with their company information, they have trouble with telephone calls or emails and that sort of thing. So this is where there's a lot of demand for skills courses. And these kind of business scenarios that I was talking about, and those videos, that kind of training, and the people skills, all of that practical application of business English language is a really big part of why it sells to the big companies. And again, if a student is going to look for a job, they have to be aware that they're going to have a lot of contact with the English language. So the course should help them with that. So that's just a couple of examples. So just as a final reminder, because I think we're beginning to run out of time and I want to save time for questions, just a reminder of the things to take away with you. The biggest plus for me and for a lot of business English teachers is this all-in-one pack. You don't need to buy 2 or 3 components. You have everything in one place, and that includes the extra practice that replaces the print workbook. You have that extra online practice as well with all of the extra listening, which is such a big plus for business English students. You have all of your audio and video to download. You can use it for short courses, intensive courses, or the complete long courses. The fast track mapping and the flexibility of the course allows you to adapt it to suit all sorts of different scenarios that you will come across with your teaching. You can use everything online and offline, with the exception of obviously the online practice, but everything else is available online and offline. It's the communicative, personalized, you have all of that functional language so the students can sit in class and go straight out and use it. That's a huge plus. Plus the digital component we have within the Teachers Resource Centre, you also have a presentation digital version of the student's book, and that allows you to present it in class with a projector, or you can also offer online training, and for companies in particular that's extremely important because they like the flexibility and to be able to cut costs by offering online training, having 5 or 6 people from different branches all in one place, but not in the same place at the same time, if that makes sense. So hopefully we've managed to cover all possibilities with this course. I hope I can answer your questions now, but that's pretty much everything I had to tell you about the course, and I hope I've given you some useful information. And I'm going to be around for the next 5 minutes or so, and I can answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Olga. Thank you. So there's quite a lot of people typing, so bear with me. Dennis, the best length of a lesson, it really depends. I think if you're doing something like a case study, I would say 60 minutes is better. But for a full course where you have the introduction phase and then the practice phase and then the personalization phase, I think 90 minutes is probably better. But 60 or 90 are ideal. It doesn't really matter. Does that answer the question? Dennis, there are normally 20 units in each level. The starter level is shorter. The starter level is only 60 hours long rather than 120. How many lessons in a unit? Ooh, I've got to do the maths here. It depends on the unit. Some are longer than others. I think you would probably need a 60-minute lessons per unit, I would have thought. Maybe a bit longer to include the video lessons. How can a peer lesson just accompany to order and company training? Okay, so what our customers in Germany do is they incorporate the in-company into the offer that they have to make for companies. And in-company, it can be adapted to suit the company's needs. So like I said, a lot only book 30 hours. So the course is flexible enough to be able to do that. And actually, when you look through the units, it can be divided into sections as well. So if they just say we need practice for meetings, then you can use the 6 units in intermediate, for example, to give a course on meetings. Plus, of course, the video content is really important for the companies. They really love that sort of thing. The all-in-one pack makes sure that it has all the content in one place, and it's a price that the companies are interested in as well, because companies are always trying to save money where they can. So something with a fixed price but with a massive amount of content is always a really big plus for them. Dennis, I think that's a question for your local office. I will be in a lot of trouble if I answer that one. Yeah, if you ever have any questions regarding in-company and how to buy it, then do contact your local representatives in the Ukraine. They have an office there. Ina has just given you the website. All of their contact details are available on there. There isn't a specific dictionary, Veronica, for in-company. I would obviously recommend the Macmillan Dictionary Online to use alongside it because of its search function, so you can search for specific vocabulary. But I think most business English students would look at a dictionary on their tablets or on their iPhones, so a print dictionary is less useful for them. They want something with a quick search function. So I would go with our online dictionary for that. So just wait for Pauline. There's a couple of people typing. Yes, there is a glossary available online in the online resource centre. Sorry, the Student Resource Centre. There is a glossary, yes. We also have word lists available on our website. We have them obviously translated into German, I suppose, and I think there are word lists just in English that you can use to put translations in. Okay, so I think that's more or less everybody's questions. So thanks everybody for coming along, and hope you have fun within company and find it useful and have fun teaching business English. So see you another time. Bye-bye.
Laura, thanks a lot.
Welcome.
In a moment, dear colleagues, you will see the form after filling which you'll get the certificate. And we're looking forward to Laura's next webinar, which is going to be somewhere in October on teaching adults, right?
We're going to have a webinar on the course book Straightforward.